I'm Richard Taylor. It's the 22nd of November 2018, and today the board of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough NHS strategic body, called the NHS STP, is to meet in public for the first time. And I'm thinking about going along this afternoon. I'm particularly interested in seeing how our councillors, there are two councillors, the Deputy Leader of Peterborough City Council and a Cambridgeshire County Councillor who are there, and I'm interested to see what they're doing to tackle some of the problems in our local health services. Some of the problems that we've got include ambulance delays, so people are being left sometimes on the floor, sometimes on the road in the cold, waiting for ambulances, and there's also delays getting people from ambulances into hospitals. And also our hospitals are full, which is a problem because then people are waiting too long for operations. And some of the key problems that we've got are due to a lack of coordination between the ambulance service, the hospitals and the county council, which is responsible for care outside of hospital. So this body, this STP, the Sustainability and Transformation Programme Board, is charged with working together and coordination between those bodies. So all those bodies are represented on the board. And one of the problems that we've got is that there are currently separate budgets in the NHS between, say, the ambulance service, hospitals and the county council. So if the county council make it easier to get people out of hospital quicker, so people don't need to be in hospital, they provide routes for them to get out. The county council, it costs them money to provide that, but the benefits accrue to the hospital. And there's also the question, what's the incentive to the hospital for getting ambulances to turn around quickly and when they take people to the hospital? So at the moment we have silos rather than a systemic approach, and the idea is that this Sustainability and Transformation Board will be able to break those silos and make the system work together as a whole more efficiently and more safely, and we'll get a better health service out of it. So that's the plan, and this body is meeting in public for the first time. So as an interested citizen, someone interested in how the health service is working here as well as across the country, I'm going to go and I'm going to try and use the usual reporting methods I use at meetings. I'm going to try and live tweet, I'm going to try and film, put the meeting on YouTube so that I can back up my comments, and so that I can pass things that happen to my elected representatives and elected representatives from the area that's covered by the board. Now, something that's a bit concerning today for me is that this is a meeting where there is no right to film. So I've been campaigning for a right to film in local councils, and that was a successful campaign. I know there's managed to get a law which says we can have a right to film, live tweet and photograph local government meetings. This isn't one of the meetings which is covered by that law though, and I don't know how they're going to respond when I attempt to film the meeting. Now, the clinical commissioning group is kind of taking the lead on organising this board, and I've had no problems turning up to governing body meetings at the clinical commissioning group and filming those, so that's an indication there might not be a problem. However, when I tried to film the Adam Brooks Cambridge University Hospitals NHS Trust governing body, the chair didn't seem too keen, Mike Moore, and he's going to be chairing today's meeting, and neither did the Chief Executive, Ronald Sinker. He tried to put some very restrictive conditions on my attendance, such that I wasn't able to attend and film the meeting. So I don't know how that's going to go. I have looked. Something that's really high in my consideration today is that it's going to be costing about £1,000 an hour in terms of NHS salaries for these very senior managers and others to be at this meeting. So I don't want it to delay it or disrupt it in any way. So I think I don't want to delay it more than like 1 minute, really, if I can in any way help it by turning up and reporting. So if there is a challenge, as soon as they say, well, certainly if the chairman says there is to be no filming, tweeting or photography, or even if there's to be no recording, then I will leave, because due to the state of particularly defamation law in this country, and I'm sure professional journalists and any others tweeting would not now tweet and report without a solid record of what's being said. And that also helps, and often if you tweet about what's happening, often people will claim that you're being inaccurate, and it's always useful to have the recording to back it up and to demonstrate that what you said is accurate. Of course you can make mistakes, even the best people do make mistakes, particularly in a meeting where you're trying to hear what's going on. It's not always clear, and the recording can help and correct things, and I always do my best to go back and use the recording and expand on what I've tweeted and correct it if necessary, or give the full context. Now, I am concerned about a few things. One thing I've got to think about today's meeting is the law on harassment. Hopefully there should be no issue there, although I have attempted to film meetings involving some of these people before. So some of these people, the people who are at the governing body meeting in Annabrook, will be there again today. And if you do something twice, without you might have to justify it following a charge of harassment. So that's something that I've got to consider. But I think what I'm doing is entirely reasonable, and the benefits are enormous. Like if we can stop just one person having to stay on the road in the cold for longer than necessary, or get someone an operation quicker, prevent unnecessary waits, the benefits are enormous. So I think that in terms of the public interest here, I think there's a public interest in seeing what these NHS managers are doing and what our councillors are doing in terms of setting the direction and holding them to account. So I think there's a huge public interest in going along and doing a good job at reporting and commenting on what's happening. So I think that it's worth taking some degree of personal risk to do this today. And it's really disappointing that there's any degree of personal risk involved. Now, something else that might happen is these people, often they're going to be very highly paid NHS managers, as I said. They'll have underlings with them, and some of those underlings might, in my experience, misjudge their role. They might think that their role, even though they're public servants, is to protect their principal from the public. So they might start fighting me, they might start grabbing my equipment, they might start trying to turn it off, and those things have all happened to me, and that can be incredibly difficult and challenging to deal with. My aim will be to do all I can to avoid that kind of thing. I'll run away, essentially. If I have to go through fire doors, get out, escape, I will do so. I will ask people to step away quietly, and as I will speak quietly because I don't want to be seen to be, even if I'm under threat myself, I don't want to be seen to be doing something which, like, you can be accused of assaulting someone if you shout at them. So I want to very calmly say, please step back. That's my kind of plan if I'm approached in an intimidatory fashion. My intention is to attend the meeting about between 10 and 5 minutes beforehand, which is the kind of thing I normally do when I turn up for an appointment anywhere. I don't want to be sat in the room for like 20 minutes, half an hour beforehand, because if I am, then in my experience, then that almost encourages officers to come and challenge me and try and intimidate me and prevent filming. Like it might go the other way this afternoon. The board have said that they're keen to operate more transparently, so they might well really like having people reporting and filming on their proceedings, but we just don't know. And like often local government meetings can be really dull. Hopefully this afternoon's one will be, in terms of at least kind of the things that go on around the edges in terms of right of access and right to film and record and report. Now, something else I've got to consider is the law on aggravated trespass. You're not allowed to go on somewhere where you're not allowed to be and prevent people doing something that they're allowed to do. I think that's a reasonable summary. Anyway, that's one of the laws that people who want to sort of take an active role in society and report on what's happening and need to consider. The problem is that all of these laws don't have exemptions for sort of being an active citizen and being a journalist. So you might have to defend your actions. And of course, and the problem is, if courts were sort of cheap, easy, local, quick, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But unfortunately, in our society, there is a really big penalties in terms of the rest of your life and the costs of running the rest of your life if you are deemed to be criminal, or even if you have to go to court and defend yourself, unfortunately. So we live in a very difficult environment to engage in how we do things like run our local health services, and that's something I want to change. I want to change that environment. I want to make it really easy for people to turn up to local meetings and take part by reporting and by commenting. I think that will really strengthen our democracy, and that's something that I've been really trying to do, and I've had a few successes, particularly with the opening up of local councils and the right to report local councils over the last 10 years or so. So actually I've been doing this kind of thing. I've been following how my most local elements of government have been operating since I was 18, so for almost 20 years now, since I went to university. I started following what the student union was doing, which at that point was my most local, most relevant group of sort of local elected representatives. And so I think I'm in a good position to do this today. I think I'm ready to do it today. I've got a little bit of a cold, but otherwise I'm in sort of a good personal position to be able to do it. I had a good breakfast, so hopefully I won't get arrested, but there's always a possibility, and so you've got to consider that. It's a couple of hours, well, it's about an hour away in Peterborough, so it's going to be a couple of hours of driving for me there and back. And something a lot of people ask me is, well, what's the personal benefit of doing this? Well, essentially there isn't one. It's going to cost me money today in fact I'm taking time off work that could be paying money to go, and it could be paying me money to go and do this, so there's going to be costs there. It's going to cost me in terms of my fuel, and of course there's all the personal risk and the sort of the stress and emotional impact of that potential risk that's involved. So there are lots of downsides to me. I suppose there must be upsides if I want to do it, and I think the upside is that I'm someone who wants to play my part in society, play my part in sort of being a modern human, and part of being a modern human in Britain at the moment is, I think you should take an interest in the way that the country is being run, and this is a really important part of it. How our health service is run is really important, so that's why I want to go and see what's happening at this key, unprecedented public board meeting this afternoon, and that's why I'm going to be going along. My aim will be to publish the full meeting on a video on YouTube, and possibly do some clips, or at least pointing to specific bits of it that are of interest on Twitter, and copying those or mentioning in those maybe our MPs and our local councillors and others who can take action. So I'm very interested in what's happening this afternoon. I could just go along and sit at the back quietly and just sort of soak it all in for myself to improve my own knowledge, but I think it's nice if I go there, then I may as well share it with those who are unable to make it to Peterborough in the middle of the afternoon on a working day, which would be, I imagine, the vast majority of the almost 1 million or so people who will be affected by the decisions that this board takes. So I'll leave it there. My plan will be to, if I've got time to upload this before I go, I will, and then I might link to it probably as an unlisted video, because it won't be of interest to many people, but just link to it from the description of the main videos on this event, just so people can see what I'm thinking about before I go out today. Right, so I need to get myself ready to go. So one more thing, just in terms of the plan for when I arrive. I mentioned that I intend to turn up sort of between 5 and 10 minutes before it starts, just as I normally do for any appointment, and that is so that I don't get sort of intimidated before the meeting proper starts. Because what I'd like to see is, if there is going to be a ban on filming and recording, it'd be nice if that came from the chair, sitting sort of around the meeting table, and it was very clearly the view of the STP as a board. If the chair says it and no one objects, that kind of indicate that it's a view of the board, and that'd be something that I can then take away and act on. I can take to MPs, Commons, Health Select Committee, people within the NHS as well. So I can use that as a basis to campaign on. I can of course also offer to stand for election myself, saying that this is something that I would change about the way that we run our society. And when I turn up, what I'm planning to do is see if there's any Wi-Fi at the venue, pretty free of accessible Wi-Fi from outside. If there is, then I'll try and live stream going in and the initial elements of the meeting. I think that'll be engaging to people, and that's when I think there might be, potentially there could be problems, or it could be particularly interesting. So what one issue I've got there is that there will be staff at the venue. It's a not-for-profit organisation that runs a venue in a Peterborough football ground. And what I plan to do is I'll keep it running and live as I go in. I'll probably do a little introduction, say where I am and why, and then go in. I'll try and cover the camera just so that I don't get personal information of people who are not involved in the meeting. I have the staff at the venue, in other words, and then once I'm at the meeting, I tend to film essentially the board members that I want to film, but I won't be accepting, if people try and bully me into accepting any reporting restrictions, then I won't accept them, because I think it's really important to not be intimidated and restricting what you do. The judgments on what should be reported have to be down, I think, to those people who are actually doing the reporting. The STP board doesn't have the powers of a court to issue reporting restrictions. Now, one thing that the chair might commonly say is don't film the public, but what if something journalistically noteworthy happens? What happens if our local MPs are there, for example? If they heckle, that might be noteworthy. Even the fact they're there might be noteworthy. So I think it might be a photograph of them sat there at the board, or even some of the councillors, some of the people who have been elected as members of governing bodies, of NHS bodies. Like, who's there to observe today is journalistically potentially interesting. So I won't accept any comments like that, or any attempts to impose restrictions like that. There shouldn't be any. As far as I'm aware, there's no members of the public due to speak on the agenda, but even if they're aware, that shouldn't be a problem. What I've just experienced in the past is that people in the health service seem to be particularly poor at making data protection judgments, surprisingly, so they don't seem to grasp that people can, if they want to, speak publicly about the experiences they've had of the health service and their own health conditions. And of course, there's no problem if people are open about their health conditions and then want to speak about them, speak about their treatments, then they can do it. It's right and reasonable to report on them. And sometimes public meetings about the NHS often have patients contributing to them, and of course reporting on those contributions is reasonable and very important, because those people are presumably trying to change the health service based on their opinions and their experiences, and everyone else, hundreds of thousands of others who would be affected by those changes, potentially need to be able to see and comment on them as well. So essentially, we'll wait and see. I've done a really good attempt to think all this through. This is a subject that I really think about a lot of, because there's a lot of opposition in our society to essentially news reporting and commenting on things in public life. There's quite a lot of an attitude of don't get involved, don't comment on things that aren't sort of directly impacting you at the moment. And there are quite a lot of risks, as I've been through, so I think it's understandable why it's not particularly common for people to stand up and do a bit of activism and try and make the way we run our society work a bit better. Hopefully I can do my little bit. I've not been doing that much recently on this, but I've got the equipment, I've got the ability to travel. I can do this, I can do something good for hopefully local area here in Cambridge and Peterborough, and perhaps further afield. So I'm going to give it a go this afternoon and see if I can do something good.